Hey everyone, welcome to the CyberHub Engage podcast. This is our special mailbag episode, our weekly mailbag submission episode coming from CyberHub Engage subscriber from LinkedIn, YouTube, and most importantly, Patreon. And why Patreon? Because that's where you give us a little bit of your money so we keep doing what we do to give you awesome, amazing content for security and privacy. So make sure you go to patreon.com/CyberHub Engage for all the great perks and benefits, including part of the questions in the mailbag, including being part of our LinkedIn group, including being part of some of the exclusive stuff we do on our YouTube channel. So make sure you go to patreon.com/CyberHub Engage. Again, that's patreon.com/CyberHub Engage. And today's mailbag is going to be all about you guys and your questions. We've been talking over the last week or two on a lot of different issues, which are going to be covered in the mailbag. So if you haven't been listening or tuning in, this will be a good catch-up period. I've got Micah in the studio. Micah, what's up?
What up?
How's it?
It's going good. No complaints over here.
I like how they do it in Hawaii. They go, how's it?
How's it?
Right? Do you ever watch Dog the Bounty Hunter?
I love Dog the Bounty Hunter.
Like it'd be like, how's it, bruh? Well, we got our first question on the docket. Let's hear it. Micah, what you got?
Our first question comes from Ian from Nashville. Ian asks, "Hi, James. Love the podcast. You reported on President Trump's executive order. You argue that it's the right move, but won't this make technology more expansive all around?"
You mean expensive?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it says expansive.
Well, expensive. That's what he means.
Yeah.
No spell
It's okay,
check.
Ian. Will it make technology more expensive all around?
So, President Trump last week issued an executive order essentially dictating that specific technology that's being deployed across the U.S. national grid system has to get approval from the Bureau of the BIS. And I've argued that it's the right move because it is the right move. What's going to make technology more expensive is tariffs. And that's something that we haven't really spoken about, but it's very much out there. Tariffs don't cost China more money. It ends up costing us more money simply because we end up paying more. So the buck gets passed down to us. Having said that, what President Trump did is the right move from a national security perspective. We shouldn't have our network in our national grid and our national infrastructure give anyone a backdoor, specifically the Chinese. That could create a lot of very uncomfortable situations come in the future when you try to negotiate a new trade deal or you have a disagreement over a specific global issue. Them having a backdoor, them employing technology in our national infrastructure is going to cause a world of pain and the kind of card we don't want to give someone else. I've been a strong advocate that all of our national critical infrastructure technology should be an in-house U.S.-made product through and through. And if anything, this is the opportunity for a awesome entrepreneur with some good financial backing to start doing it here locally in the U.S. and locally source everything you need. Yes, it's going to make things a bit more expensive, but I'd rather us pay the price of it now up front than buy something cheap and then having to pay for it over decades and decades in our foreign policy, in our infrastructure, and most likely in costs. It'll cost us way more over the long run than it would be to produce something here in the U.S. from A to Z and deploy it within our critical national infrastructure. That's my take on it, Ian. Thanks for the question.
All right, next question. This comes from Tanya from New York. James, I enjoy listening to the Microsoft episode and love the new format. You argue that Microsoft is rebuilding, but they haven't really gained a big market share. How do you see them evolving?
So, Tanya, a few things. One, thank you for listening. Yeah, we do like the new Goodbye Privacy format where we're not just talking about one topic. We highlight one topic, but we talk about a few more during the episode, so we make it a bit more diverse. We have been getting a lot better at our Goodbye Privacy episodes. If you listened to the first one and you thought it was too long, I think now we're down to half the time, aren't we, Micah? We're around 30, 35-minute podcast. Yep. In a newer format, talking about more topics. We've been able to crunch down some of our research. So for those that have stuck through the growing pains of our podcast, I do appreciate it. Now to Tanya's question, where she says, you argue that Microsoft is rebuilding, but they haven't really gained a big market share. How do you see them evolving? Well, it's not that they haven't gained market share. They're number 2 and 3 in market share across multiple industries, including Office 365 usage, including their Azure cloud product, including business communications with Skype for Business. They're gaining market share, and they're going to continue to gain market share out of a simple perspective. They have one unified solution. So eventually, when you go to an organization and Microsoft is able to plug 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 and it all equals 10, then you're going to see them really start to dominate market share, specifically in the small and medium-sized business sector, because they are going to be able to offer an A to Z full complete solution. And that's how they're going to evolve. Microsoft has done a lot of rebuilding in its brand, in its name brand, kind of as people always viewed Microsoft as that old lazy brand from the 80s and 90s. And they're trying to reinvent themselves. They've done so with the Xbox, and they've done so with Microsoft Azure. And now the question remains is, what is it going to look like in 3 to 5 years? They'll be dominant. They'll be a big player. Microsoft isn't going anywhere, folks. They're not. And they proved that last week when they issued a patch for the Windows XE vulnerability that they found. So they found a vulnerability, and Microsoft of old would have been like, hey, upgrade or otherwise, but they realized that some really critical systems run on some of these devices and operating systems, and decided to go out, create a patch, and ask everyone to patch it. And went out in the news and said, please patch it. So they're doing all the right moves when it comes to client communication, keeping people reliant, letting them know Microsoft is a partner. They're going to get up there. They're going to be right now they're probably in the top 3. They'll stay there for a very long time. They may, given how things are evolving, they may end up in the top spot for a little while. I mean, that could very well be plausible. Absolutely. Thanks for your question, Tanya. Micah, what do we got next?
Next question's from Devin from Atlanta.
Hometown.
I love the Goodbye Privacy podcast. It's spot on. I was discussing privacy with one of my coworkers, and he said that he doesn't care how his information is used as long as the embarrassing stuff isn't out there. How do you argue against this kind of approach?
Well, Mike and I have this discussion all the doggone time. So, Devin, hometown favorite, make sure you come check us out on Thursday at Atlanta Tech Park. I'll be hosting a panel with my good friend David Katz, Donna Gallagher, and Azar Kenning from SunTrust. It's going to be a blast. Now to your question. So, here's what these big companies understand, Devin. Is like your coworker, there are hundreds of millions of people just like that don't care. As long as they could still use Facebook, it's as long as they still get the services they want. They don't really care what's going on. And when you talk to them about what data do you really care about, it's the embarrassing stuff, the nude pictures, the sexting, the possible cheating, or the talking smack. The challenge you have with that is self-awareness and self-privacy doesn't exist in a lot of the younger generation. They live in a social media world. They live on Snapchat, on Instagram. They live in all those places. They don't really care. And they share things, the most private of things, for everyone to see. We see more and more of that happening. Part of it has to do with culture. Culture is a very important thing here when it comes to social media. And I say that because culture has a way of impacting what we deem appropriate to share, what we trust within our devices and the different social media networks we use. And that's exactly what you're dealing with here is the culture of your coworker is, I don't really care. I've got nothing to really hide outside of the embarrassing stuff. And if that embarrassing stuff is out there, well, then that's embarrassing. I don't want it there. And then only then will I care, but I won't care about everything else. I'll just care about my embarrassing stuff. And we see that all the time on Twitter and Facebook. Someone will tweet something really freaking stupid and everyone will go, oh, look, what a horrible tweet. And they start digging down your tweets and then they start posting other stuff that you've tweeted about. And then all of a sudden you're really embarrassed. You turn your tweets on private. Right? And you don't want anyone else to look at it. Well, that's not a way to approach your privacy and your data. Once you put something online, it's always going to be there. It's cached. It's somewhere. And if someone wants to find it, they will. So you can use, the rule of, what would Jesus do kind of thing. What WWJD? Well, what would your mom do or what would your dad do? That's not really a positive argument on the internet. Because some parents today are worse than their kids. I've seen moms post stuff on Facebook and Twitter that have been extremely disturbing for me personally, nonetheless for their kids. You have to educate your coworker, Devin. And bottom line is you got to be able to have a conversation with them and really explain the consequences, but don't take it too personal if they don't understand. Because sometimes they just won't understand. And they don't really care to understand because it doesn't really matter to them. And until they fall a victim of something, it doesn't really matter. That's it for Devin's questions. What's next, Micah?
Next, we have Richard from Washington, D.C. Richard writes, last week, I was listening to the first podcast on terms and conditions. When you talk of regulation, do you think these should be part of
legislation
as well? Excuse me.
Mike, are you having it's not Monday, it's Tuesday. We're not doing this in the morning. It's in the afternoon. Have you had something to drink today?
I wish. No, not yet.
You haven't
Just getting tongue-tied.
You're getting tongue-tied. Are you nervous being on camera?
No, not at all.
All right. So, Richard, Washington, D.C. Terms and conditions should be part of legislation. Legislation should determine terms and conditions simply because it lays down the framework of how you obtain, process, and the person's rights to the data. Now, I would say this any other time and say, you know what, we should kick this to the guys in D.C. where you're from, Richard, and let them figure this piece out. The problem I have is the guys in D.C.'s right now are not exactly the sharpest tool in our shed. I think we have, 100 Senate members, 535 congressmen, and 635 of possibly some of the most divisive people in the country. And they can't agree on anything, nonetheless, on how to write privacy legislation or regulation.
And they're too busy fundraising.
Well, they're always fundraising, aren't they? Yeah. So, yes, we do need some action on terms and conditions. That's why in the Microsoft episode, I challenge any company that wants to talk about privacy to do it themselves. And it's really funny for me because Mark Zuckerberg, when he went to the Hill and he was being asked questions by our elected officials, he said, well, you guys write it, we'll go through with it. And I'm like, why would you do this? I mean, no one really wants to make the tough call here. Congress doesn't want to take it. They want to kick it down the road. We had Michael Daughtry on the CyberHub Engage podcast episode where he spoke about how the FTC went after LabMD and his company and how the bureaucracy in DC works. And that's the same exact thing here, folks. And to answer your question, Richard, these guys, they want to kick the buck down the road. No one wants to really handle it. People talk about it. It's a cool headline. It's something nice to talk about. It's cool for a town hall. It's good at a campaign rally and a campaign speech. But bottom line, when you're in the sacred halls of Congress where you're supposed to be working for the people, no one's really working for the people. And if they're working for the people, they're working for the very slim minority in the population, and they're forgetting the larger part of the population. And that's another aspect that's broken in our political system, is the small voice within a party, whether it be to the right or to the left, are leading the conversation rather than the actual base, the actual moderate base. And that's why Joe Biden is leading in all the polls, because he is right there smack down in the middle. He's not falling for any of the other garbage that's out there. And that's why, there's challenge to President Trump from the Republican side in the primaries. Now, a sitting president has never been challenged in a primary, not seriously at least. The question is, can the Republican Party really form a formidable challenge? And that remains to be seen. But to go back to your question, terms and conditions should be relied on as part of legislation. The legislation should say that they should be easy enough to understand so that a 13-year-old who can open an account on Facebook can understand what he's agreeing to. And that's part of the challenge. And really the only company that's doing that anywhere halfway decent is Microsoft, with LinkedIn and their Microsoft products and Skype and Xbox. They write their terms and conditions and then they paraphrase it in simple English so that you understand it. And so, yes, Richard, we need stuff done in D.C. And if you're out in D.C., please go out there and knock some sense into some of our elected officials and help them push through this process. Micah, what's next after Richard?
Next question is Tim from Chicago. Tim writes, James, I started listening to the CyberHub Engage podcast, and now goodbye privacy. On the Microsoft episode, you challenge Microsoft to self-regulate privacy and data privacy. Do you think that's a real call to action?
Tim's challenging me, Micah.
Yep.
Well, he's calling me out. So, yes, Tim, it's a real call to action. Yes, they make millions and billions of dollars selling our information for free. They don't even pay us for it. You're absolutely right. But they have an obligation in taking and processing our data to do so honestly. Now, there's nothing more hypocritical than saying we're all for privacy and our culture is all about your privacy, but then next 10 minutes after you get off stage, you're selling it to the highest bidder. If that is your approach to privacy, go to your shareholders and board and sell them your vision. Institute your vision and lead. And once you're leading, let no one get in your way. And then start doing some good faith. Reach out to legislator and regulators in good faith, showing them how well you're doing and why this is a great standard for privacy. You're never going to please 100% of your customers. That's just not going to happen. But you can try to please a majority of them with having some basic privacy laws and rights in place for your users. There was nothing more devastating than the Ashley Madison breach. I thought that breach, in terms of just pure devastation, probably had the most direct impact on the victims. The victims meaning the people, because many of them, if you don't know what Ashley Madison is, it was a website. It's an adult website for meeting other adults for the sake of a purely sexual relationship with none of the relationship piece of it. It's just a sex relationship. And so a sexual relationship. And when the Ashley Madison breach happened, there were numerous cases of divorce in courts in the months following that breach, because almost everyone went and started looking for their spouse or significant other on the list of clients there, searching emails or names to see if they were on there. Now, that specific breach was devastating for people. In fact, there's been reports of people committing suicide, divorce rates spiking, just overall bad. Now, is the Ashley Madison website bad? No, they provide a service. They were victims of a crime, but because the users had no right to their privacy when they fell victim of a crime, they had no repercussions against Ashley Madison for that action. And so here, you really have to formulate an idea of, if you want my privacy, if you want my data, if you want me to spend so much time on your platforms, give me the rights. And I think if Microsoft really took the lead on this, they could really lead the industry. And I think people would follow suit because they have the pull. They're Microsoft. And they would get a lot of support. And will it impact their bottom line? I don't know. That's up to them to figure out, right? That's the risk you take. My guess is it won't. My guess is all the people that care about privacy will go to Microsoft. We'll start using more Microsoft products. We'll start using more Microsoft services because they have more rights. And the consumer will start demanding it from other companies who will have to follow suit in one way or another. And all it takes is one company to come out and say, we're doing it. That's all it takes. And a big one, a Microsoft, a Facebook. But Mark Zuckerberg doesn't have the testicular fortitude to do that. He's still apparently thinking he's a college kid in Stanford, right? That's where he went to school, Stanford?
I believe so.
Yeah. And so he's still waiting for someone to come and say, okay, Mark, here's what you're allowed to do on Facebook, and here's what you're not allowed to do on Facebook. Instead of saying, how do we want to approach privacy of all of our users? How do we even out the privacy versus the money part? And what if we offered someone a little bit of money every month to be able to get more access to their data? Allow them to be part of a research of studies of all these different things. Now, this has been done successfully. The model for this has been done. I've spoken about it on previous episodes, with the focus groups. So social media could have a very similar model to focus groups and be able to successfully execute that, where people would probably sign off on their data being used if they're getting paid. But no company is going to do that, because no company is going to want to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to people who are willing to do that. But then the more data you got, the cheaper the value of the data becomes, right? If only 10,000 people are willing to do it, chances are those 10,000 people are going to get a lot of money. My bet is that if they offered anyone $10 a month to be able to give up all their privacy online by using their social network, have it tracked, marketed to, participate in different groups, for those 10 or 20 bucks a month, you'd have a big amount of the population that would agree. And when you think of, spending money on producing and creating a commercial, just doing that all on its own and letting that spread virally would be an insane amount of money for Facebook in the long term. It's just my idea on that. So yes, Tim, the call to action is real. I think some companies should be doing it. I've challenged Microsoft simply because of the research we've done. We've been able to attribute to them a lot of different talks from their leadership on privacy, but they haven't done a damn thing about it. And there's nothing I hate more than hypocrisy. Thanks, Tim. Final question, Micah. Final question.
Final question comes from Michael from Miami, Florida. Michael writes, you indicated the news cycle last week was busy, and I work in cyber, and we saw an uptick in activity. What do you attribute the increase in activity to?
Great question, Michael. Thank you for your work in cybersecurity. You are a real warrior of the web. Now, having said that,
Hashtag web warrior.
Hashtag web warrior. Hashtag data cartels. Hashtag CISO talk. Can I go through all of our hashtags?
Ask James.
Hashtag ask James. What are our hashtags?
Hashtag ask James. Hashtag DDoC. Hashtag CISO talk. Hashtag data cartels. Hashtag 60 sec cyber. 60 SECCYBER.
Did you come up with that one?
60 sec cyber.
60 sec cyber. That sounds like a.
You got to get creative. With
sounds
hashtags.
like a really dirty like foreplay thing. Hey baby, you want to go do 60 sec cyber?
You got to get creative. All hashtags are taken.
Hey honey, I got 60 sec cyber coming your way. Said every man to every girl ever.
What does that even mean?
60 sec cyber. 1 minute man, right? Then Missy Elliott.
So you're suggesting it means that this person is a cyber Minuteman. That's
Yes,
going to be.
I am.
That's your new nickname, Cyber Minuteman.
Cyber Minuteman. That's actually pretty good. Vote on it. You should make that a poll on
anybody
Twitter.
who tweets at James calling him Cyber Minuteman, hashtag Cyber Minuteman, gets a free CISO Talk t-shirt.
Wow. That's coming out of your paycheck.
That's fun. Totally worth it.
So what's the last question?
The last question.
Never mind. We got it. Never mind. Let me reread it here. So you indicated the news cycle last week was busy. I work in cyber. We saw an uptick in activity. What do you attribute the increase in activity to? Michael from Miami, Florida. Well, Michael, let's start off with, first of all, politics. The uptick in activity in cyber is always related to something else that's going on. And now let's attribute what went on last week. One, very late the week before last week, we sent the USS Abraham Lincoln into the Persian Gulf, letting Iran know, you fuck with America, we fuck back. Right?
Bitch.
I think we're a clean content podcast. We might get in trouble with iTunes for that one.
Hey, that's true.
We try to be family friendly because people do listen to us in the car, so we apologize for my profanity and Micah's just untimely interruption of the B word. So we sent the USS Abraham Lincoln to the Persian Gulf. We've implemented tariffs on China and increased tariffs on pretty much all imports coming from China, excluding just a very minute minority of trade items that come from China. And all diplomatic relations with North Korea have pretty much reached a standstill. So when you look at 3 of the 4 largest perpetrators of cyber attack against the U.S. and U.S. interest, it's China, North Korea, Iran, and Russia. And last week, we didn't really see a lot of Russian activities because Pompeo met with the Russian foreign minister and Putin in Sochi. And so those specific meetings may have led to a slight decrease in Russian cyber activity. But from what we've been monitoring here at CyberHub Engage and what we've been seeing is an increase in Chinese and Iranian activity. The North Koreans have always been active in cyberspace. The tougher the sanctions, the more ways they're looking to get money. The regime isn't just going to fold over. They're going to continue to perpetrate crime, starve their people, and do all the nasty things that North Korea does in an effort to maintain its power on that country and the poor folks that live in it. Iran and China, well, those are pure. Iran isn't going to fold over and negotiate with the U.S. when you're hardballed. The card that Trump overplayed was he went out publicly and went after Iran, said, don't mess with us. And he did so publicly. So he never gave him an opportunity or any way to come to the table to have a discussion. Because if you come to the table and have a discussion after that, you're pretty much saying you're bowing down to that pressure, which governments in a country like Iran, where there's daily protest about the situation of the economy and the deterioration of conditions within the country of Iran, all of those play a part in the government not bowing down to U.S. pressure and not really conforming to what the U.S. expects from them. And they're going to start launching all kinds of different activities. Some of it is in the cyberspace, and we've seen some of it with, the missile launch to the U.S. Embassy in Iraq a few days ago, to other activity around the Middle East, including, sabotaging those ships off the coast of Fujairah in the UAE and so forth. And with China, it's the trade war. And China's going to continue to go after IP and data because they want to win the AI war. They want to be a dominant economy, and they're well on track of doing so. And Trump is making some moves to ensure that U.S. interests are kept safe so that if and when China does pass us as a large economy, we still have some sort of say on the global stage, and we don't just become part of a communist agenda globally, which would be a very scary thought for some of us living in the free world. And we're going to continue to see the Chinese and Iranians use proxies and themselves to continue to increase cyber attacks, Michael. And it's going to get big, and we're going to hear of multiple breaches, I think, over the next 30 to 90 days as data breach notification laws dictate. We'll start to hear more about some of the stuff that went on in the month of May. And stay tuned. And if you remember, Equifax discovered they were breached in July, reported it in September, but the breach really started a while ago. But May was the month when they kind of started looking at that activity. And I know that because next week on the CyberHub Engage podcast, we'll have Grammy Payne in the studio, live and in person, with his new book, talking about the Equifax breach. And he was the person who was patient zero on the Equifax breach. So make sure you tune in. And if you haven't subscribed to the CyberHub Engage podcast, do so now. Michael, thank you for your question. So if you're listening, our Ask James segment, a few ways you can get your questions into the mailbag is you can join our CyberHub Engage LinkedIn group on LinkedIn, CyberHub Engage. Subscribe, follow us. You can email us, message us directly through LinkedIn, and that'll get you on our mailbag. If you're a subscriber on YouTube, you can always comment below any one of our videos with your questions. We scan those always and make sure to comment and answer any questions you may have. And finally, you can go to Patreon and be a financial supporter and backer, and those questions always get priority. So with that being said, make sure to go to patreon.com/CyberHub Engage. If you're watching us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, or anywhere else, make sure you follow or subscribe to our page so that you can get the latest and greatest in cybersecurity, information security, and privacy news, updates, and stories. That's it for this week's mailbag. My name is James Azar. Thanks for listening.